You are recording. Go ahead.
Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Mike Remington, Mayor Pro Tem. Welcome to the City Council Committee of the Whole meeting for the City of Duval for Tuesday, August 4th. It's 5:32 in the evening. Tonight, after go to the order, we have 3 items we're discussing. We have fortunate to have with us tonight Melissa Namey from the Snoqualmie Valley Transportation Coalition. Our second item is department updates, and our third is coronavirus, COVID-19. And if council doesn't object, I'd like to swap item 2 and 3 so that we would do our COVID-19 first, and then the mayor would follow up with our department administrative update. Any concerns with that? Not seeing any. We'll go ahead and move forward. First item, in fact, I did want to take just a moment. I forget sometimes that we, along with those that are from the city staff as well as council and the mayor, that we have attendees. And tonight we have 2 attendees. So while I don't see you, we do want to welcome you and thank you for attending our meeting. In addition, I just wanted to recognize that we have had some communication from citizens. I believe that that will be read during the council meeting. One of those was input regarding 275th, and the other was regarding internet connectivity and high speed, a regular concern of our citizens. And so we just wanted to recognize and thank you for sending that your comments and feedback to City Council and the city. Well, our first item is good of the order. I'll first just ask council members. Councilmember Lango.
Yes, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. A couple Fridays ago, I had the pleasure of participating in a visual tour of HopeLink, and it was very educational. And I just want to touch on a couple key things. They really have some comprehensive programs. They have a mobile food program that stops in Duval. They have, although their main office is in Carnation, they actually have an office at here in Duval. They have an energy educator, a clothing bank. They have some Spanish speaking capacity. They have a food bank in Carnation, which is still available to our folks. A women and infant care office to help with those kinds of things. And they also have a workforce computer availability and employment services counseling that they are connected into. So I thought that was all pretty awesome. They let me know a little bit more about what they were doing in Duval, and I got some supplemental information this afternoon. For example, they've provided emergency financial assistance to 9 Duval residents. And the average amount of financial assistance they give a client is something like $1,200. So it's not insignificant. The other important thing is that the folks that live here in Duval that are part of HopeLink, they pay 30% of their income or 50% of the area median income, whichever is less. So they are really providing quite a bit of assistance. The average rent here is $440. I have more information, but I think that covers some of the key points. And, you know, of course, we are potentially going to be working with them on the Utility Assistance Fund. They've been doing something like that for quite some time. So I'm sure we'll learn more about that in the future.
Yeah, thank you. What a great resource we have here in our own community. A big help for so many. Other council members that would like to speak? Councilmember Naplin.
Yeah, so I just wanted to comment on the public comment that we received about internet access, and just let everyone know that earlier this year, King County released a study on broadband availability for all of King County. They focused a lot on the unincorporated areas, and if you look at the map of King County, right down the center, I think they even called it the Central District, you could see that there were a lot of holes, and that runs straight through Duval, Carnation, kind of all of our unincorporated and even part of the city that we are lacking in service and availability. And so anyway, I just wanted to mention that to you. You can go on King County's website and read that report. They have recommendations of, you know, different ways to reach those underserved and completely unserved populations. And also just to encourage people to also fill out the survey for the Washington State one that is going on right now. They are doing a survey right now, and I'm not really sure how those two reports are going to work together. Maybe
They're separate.
Yeah.
They're, you know, they're separate efforts. You know, we at the city have put out the state survey to the public 3 times now. And they'll use that information to guide in some of the legislation. The governor has created the state broadband office. That said, the federal government continues to take away local control of these issues, making it more challenging. So we've been doing what we can to encourage folks to go ahead and fill out that survey to get more data. It's getting broadband access not just to the last mile, but to the underserved areas in each community is on our AWC legislative agenda as a priority this year, which it's taken a while to get to rise to that level. And it's becoming more discussed at the federal level, which is where the changes need to happen to ensure equity for everyone in our community. So yeah, lots of good stuff going on.
Thanks, Mayor. I did notice that the King County study was requested by King County Council, and so I wasn't sure if they had any upcoming discussions of, you know, potentially directing funding towards solving that problem.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
They have a huge, I mean, they can't even maintain their roads right now. So
Right.
my guess is that nothing's going to broadband, and that study will most likely be used to, without talking to Kathy, Councilmember Lambert, my guess is that most likely that data will be used with our federal delegation to show what's really going on with broadband in our region. So hopefully that'll help move some of these processes along.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Lingle.
Yeah, this is a quick thing. This is something we've talked about before, which is whether we are a rural designation or not. And I cruised the Valley a few days ago to look at the other Valley cities. And what impressed me was the number of elements that we have that are more rural than some of the other cities that are part of our association. And so this is one more example that we can put a tab on to start making the argument we are not purely an urban area. And I know the mayor agrees with that. So, you know, maybe this is something that our council puts on its legislative agenda to, you know, as a priority for us for next year to really chip in and help with this.
Yeah, and we had it for the last agenda, and I would expect that we'll definitely have it for this one as well, because we can't, it's one of those issues like transportation, you've got to keep it on the radar. And then if at some point the momentum's there to make the progress, and having shared the story will pay dividends in the long run.
Thanks for pointing
And
that
I
out.
do want to remind people on the council that we are not supposed to be with OPMA. We're advised not to be communicating with the public via our chat in our council meetings. So if we have constituents that are on the line, if you can send an email to the clerk, we'll make sure that your questions get answered. But especially during committee of the whole, this is a meeting of the council and not meant to be a back and forth dialogue between the public. So we just want to make sure that we're keeping on track with that.
Well, thank you. I think that's a good reminder. Although we're still allowed to just send information, basic information, but not have an open discussion or, you know, through the chat. But that's a good point. Councilmember Napland.
I just wanted to say, when I pressed send is when I saw that question come in. And so I was not responding to a question from the community. I was actually just, since I brought it up, I thought, well, I'll share it. And
No, that's okay.
cross things because I was not intending. I completely
That's
understand.
okay.
I just want to let you know my intention was not to respond to a specific constituent. I was really just providing it because
No,
I
that's-
brought it up to everyone. So
Completely understand. It's just we're all learning these new processes and hearing some of the most recent seminars on how we're supposed to do these things. I just want to make sure that we're all acknowledging that. And probably Mayor Pro Tem Rington, we probably need to make sure we mention that at the beginning of all of our public meetings, just to make
that's
sure
a
that
great
we're
point.
keeping everybody on track and make sure that folks feel that they have a way to be heard as well.
Our
So it's all good.
Jody's been working with us, trying to come up with some, some new guidelines, most of which we've already seen, but just formalize that in our committee or our city council rules. So hopefully we'll be looking at it a little bit closer and we can include that. I wanted to follow up on something that Councilmember Langle had said about making sure we're designated rural and understanding the different characteristics. I'm pretty sure when the council meeting that we have tonight is called the cow, that automatically we're rural. I think that's the number one clue right there. Other council members? Councilmember Hoag, did I see your hand up? Please, go ahead.
Yes, so in regards to the chat that we have during the Zoom meetings, at our Sound Cities meetings, our public issue committee meetings, they actually put the chats as part of the minutes of every meeting. So I don't know if that's something to discuss, whether we should be doing that or not.
I think that's great.
Just a thought.
No, I think that's a great point. I think that if we have that opportunity to look into it a little bit more, I know that there's several classes on these. I think Jody and several of our council members have attended those. But I think it's a good point. We always want to do all of our public business in an open public forum. And it just means being careful. It doesn't mean we can't just don't reply all, but just put information out there. Jody, do you know if we can capture that so that it's not as big an issue?
I am capturing it. I'm downloading it and stuff. So it is being retained for potential public records requests. I think just good rule of thumb is to not use it. It just adds one more layer of public records. But, as we're all learning how to work our way through this, you got to think about it like if you were in a physical public meeting, you wouldn't be having this back and forth with each other or with the, so you have to treat it as much as you can like you would a regular in-person meeting. So.
Good. Well, thank you for that. Other council members, mayor, other city personnel? Go ahead, Jody.
I just wanted to give a shout out to everybody who helped today to get the small business grant stuff out. We started out with a rough draft of a giant spreadsheet this morning, and right now I'm actually listening to the postage machine go off. I have a coworker who's helping me finish stamping them and getting them in the mail. Councilmember Naplin and Councilmember McHenry graciously offered to help fold stuff and label our mailing. Sherry James, my admin, helped create the email that went out. It was definitely a huge team effort. Stephanie Goodwin, the guru of all addresses in Duval, went through the spreadsheet and made sure that we were getting as much correct as we could. So I just wanted to say, yay team, we did it. And these should be in the mail tonight, if not tomorrow morning at the very latest. So just want to say thank you.
So Jody, just for our citizens listening, could you just give us that 30-second overview of what we're trying to do with that mailing in our business community?
So the mailing and the e-blast that were sent today is for the small business grant application process. We have a really tight turnaround. It includes a flyer and the procedures / application document. And it is a program that council approved at the special meeting last week. So It is to allow small businesses in the city limits of Duval to apply for up to $5,000 for a grant for COVID-related expenses.
Perfect, Jody. You nailed that. You make a great city clerk. Thank you. Other members have any before we move on? Don't see any hands up. Well, again, I'm really pleased tonight to have the Snoqualmie Valley Transportation Coalition with us, specifically Melissa Moon and Amy Biggs are with us to do a just kind of give us an update on their work. The transportation in the valley isn't quite what we see in other areas, but what we have is key and critical to many of our citizens. So we're really pleased to have both of you with us tonight. And with that, Amy, did I understand you want to share your screen now so we can see your presentation?
Yeah, we shall see. Can you hear me?
Yes, there we go. We can see it as well.
Great.
Nice job.
Okay, so are you seeing my cursor moving around?
Yes, there it is.
There we go. Okay. So we have a little slideshow, and we're going to go through this stuff pretty quickly. Thank you very much for the nice introduction. I'm Amy Biggs. I'm the director for Snoqualmie Valley Transportation, and we're a project at Mount Si Senior Center in North Bend, and we have been your local bus company since 2003.
And I'm Melissa Moon. I actually work at HopeLink, and I want to thank you, Council Member Lingle, for attending our open house the other day. I saw you on the meeting. I work out of the Carnation HopeLink Center, and I work on the mobility management team, and I help facilitate the Snoqualmie Valley Transportation Coalition, which is, the acronym is SVTC, not to be confused with SVT. I actually don't get to work with Amy on a day-to-day basis, but I love working with her when I can. And what we're going to go through tonight is what makes rural transit work, how it currently doesn't work, what you can do to help, and what the coalition is doing. It's a lot to go through, but we'll be as quick as we can, and we will hold all questions until the end and answer them then.
Okay, so I'm sure you all know this, but I think it needs to be said anyway. Most people at some point in their lives need transit. So it could be you're a teenager and you can't afford $250 a month for auto insurance, or maybe your car breaks down, it's in the shop for 5 days, you still need to get to work. If you want to do what's right for the environment, usually people who are very environmentally minded usually want to take transit. Maybe you don't like driving, you'd rather sit on a bus and commute on your iPad. If you don't feel safe to drive anymore, there's a lot of reasons that people might need transit from time to time. Basically, transit makes it possible for people to live their lives. So when developing blueprints for safe and thriving communities, solving residents' basic need to get from place to place is definitely one of the critical building blocks for well-being. So, you know, you were talking earlier about rural and how rural is different. For rural transit to work, it really needs to be all these things. It needs to be safe, dependable, convenient, affordable, and accessible. So the 5 elements are interconnected in lots of ways, and we're just going to unpack these a little bit. In terms of safety, obviously, it needs to be safe, and the buses need to be safe. In terms of SVT, we are safe. We're drivers who are well trained. Our accident rate's almost non-existent. We have an FTA-approved drug and alcohol program. There's background checks on all the drivers. The buses are clean and well maintained. And also we track all the buses in real time in case there's any issues. Also affordability makes us safer, which is one of those, you know, things are intertwined. Most bad behavior that happens on buses is actually based on arguments about paying fares. Another safety thing, using little buses instead of big buses causes less damage to the roadways, so fewer accidents. And additionally, part of safety is where people wait for the bus, and this kind of overlaps with convenience, which we'll talk about also. Dependability. Part of dependability is being reliably on time, At SVT, we are actually 99.989% on time for 2,500 to 3,500 rides we do each month. But dependability actually runs deeper than just on time. It speaks to sustainability. So being dependable means the bus route will still be there when you need it. So residents who've worked to create schedules around bus routes and have had their metro routes repeatedly canceled, this is a bad thing. We'll go into why later, and I'm sure you probably know, but when routes are canceled for transit-dependent people, they can lose their jobs, their homes, their family. So sustainability is really a key part of dependability. Convenience. Well, our buses are decidedly not convenient. In order to be convenient, they need to be frequent enough so that they are a reasonable alternative time-wise to using a car. So a big part of convenience ends up being about frequency. Commuters really aren't going to add another 3 to 4 hours to their work days just to take a bus. It's not a reasonable alternative. So another part of convenience, which I touched on before, is infrastructure. This means bus shelters that give people a safe place to wait and that protect them from the elements. You know, in the King County portion of the valley, we currently have a total of 4 covered bus stops. So if you combine a lack of infrastructure with a lack of frequency, transit-dependent people have long waits with no place to shelter, which can result in problems for local businesses. And I know you've had some of those. Affordability. Spending $100 a month to get to and from a job is a lot. Most of our fares are $1 or less, so it's about $44 a month for Monday through Friday 2-directional rides. Also on our system, kids ride free all summer to make things a little easier on working parents. So yeah, we're affordable. Accessibility. So all of the SVT buses are accessible to special needs riders and the general public. So they're equipped with bike racks and wheelchair lifts, and we get everybody on the same buses. Now, in a lot of places, especially places with large population bases, they usually tell you you need 2 completely different systems. You need regular transit for ambulatory riders, and you need to have another one for people with special needs. So we don't really have the population density for 2 different kinds of transit services. So what we've found is the smartest way is to find a way to get everybody on the same bus by just making the entire system eligible for anybody. So avoiding duplication also makes buses more affordable as well. So just a recap. Isn't that a pretty slide? Kind of like that. Looks like out in the farmlands. We're safe, we're affordable, we're accessible, dependable. Yeah, we're on time, but we're not necessarily sustainable. And convenient, no, we're not. So this is what we're seeing. If you exclude any of these elements, basically you're creating a system that only partially works for some, but it doesn't work for everybody. So as I said, a lot of these things are impacting each other. So as an example, when we started the Valley Shuttle for King County Metro, that one that goes between North Bend and Duval every 90 minutes, combination of dropping the fares, which made it more affordable, and making the bus twice as frequent, which hits on convenience, resulted in a 10-fold increase in ridership. So clearly what we need to do is work on convenience and dependability. So to support the residents, we need these two issues to be solved. So we need timely connections. So in terms of convenience, in rural routes, a frequent rural route is about every half hour to 45 minutes. In an urban area, a frequent route is every 10 to 15 minutes. The only current services we have run every 1 to 2 hours. Adequate frequency means that buses are a good alternative to driving, so this is not really an adequate frequency. So in terms of dependability, we're only going to get people to use convenient transit if they know they can plan their lives around them. So we don't want any more routes canceled. Our local residents, as you know, have long memories. we need to change their minds about transit and sustain the change. That means we don't do any projects that are like, we'll try this for a year. It takes 3 to 5 years for a rural route to become successful. Rural, as you all know, it's different. I mean, it's just different. So this is what you can do to support some of the changes. You can make sure you always have someone at the coalition meetings, and big shout out and thank you so much to Jennifer Napland for getting involved in this. So at the coalition meetings, you get local, regional, and statewide updates on transit, funding updates, and believe me, there are a lot of ways to fund buses, and we are not asking for money. You can create minimum requirements for frequency of service. You can make sure people can plan their lives and their work around them and include them in city comp plans. Minimum requirements can be aspirational, just something to shoot for, but they really need to be made concrete and stay on our radar. You can get infrastructure in place. You can ask yourself, if I lived or worked here, would this system actually work for me? There are lots of funding availabilities for projects that can be grant funded in the future. This means working to identify what you want in the city, what's going to work for people. Make sure that you have any new projects in the planning stages. Make sure they've all considered transit. I've seen a lot of new developments in a lot of different places, and since they aren't considering transit, you figure that you're going to have about 2 cars per household. You don't. You end up with about 4 cars per household, so you end up having way more parking needs than you may be planning for. Consider also that riders need shelters and benches. And you can advocate for rural equity, which I know you do because every city in the valley is trying to do that, regardless of what alphabet soup you're working with at the time. Just make sure that they're constantly looking at what can happen in terms of transportation funding and tell them what we need. And we really need to have a plan, not just a city-by-city plan, but definitely a bigger regional plan. And we're here to help with that. So as you probably know, this is what's happening right now. We only have 2 metro routes remaining that connect us to the urban areas. Out of Duval, there's only 1, and that's the 224. Out of North Bend, Snoqualmie, there's the 208, which is going to be cut back even further in September. So here's the problem. When the numbers go down due to lack of frequency, those routes may end up getting cut too. There used to be lots of routes, right? I mean, MetroHUD routes that went all the way to Snoqualmie Pass. There were multiple ways to get to Bellevue, Redmond, Seattle with minimal transfers. Now, there's no routes for people to get from the Pass to the Valley. There's no way for people to get from Fall City to Redmond or Issaquah. Employers are having a hard time getting employees who live in places other than the Valley. So in answer to the question, why does this keep happening? Here's the plain and simple truth. Transit bases everything on metrics. In rural areas, the metrics are a trap. And I really understand the need to measure things. Believe me, we measure a lot of things. But as soon as we try and quantify numbers based on, how many number of miles per ride or the rides per platform hours, every time we do this, we lose. We can't compete because of the distances involved, and our lack of population density can't compare to the more urban areas, as you know. So we never measure up, and we've consistently lost our metro routes because of the use of metrics. So, as you know, in a number of other areas, rural transit, like rural housing, like a whole lot of other things, it really needs to be about equity, not metrics. Simply put, can people in our area easily use the bus to get to where they need to go? And the answer is either yes or no. And right now, the answer is no. I mean, they can get there, but it really isn't easy. So Melissa's going to tell you about what we're doing with the Snoqualmie Valley Transportation Coalition.
So the coalition began in 2017, and since then we've done 2 surveys, one in 2017 and one last year in 2019. And we completed a 5-year transportation plan at the beginning of this year. And I will go ahead and put a link to that in the chat after this. As a side note, Supportive Community for All, SCFA also did a community needs assessment in the Valley the year after the coalition did their survey, and they also found that transportation is one of the top needs identified. As a coalition, we started the Duval Monroe Shuttle Project, and the coalition keeps cities, human services, rider advocates updated on transit and funding. And by working as a region around the subject of transit, we have a much larger and louder voice than before. We actually have 90 members currently in our coalition, which we are very happy about. Currently we are, it's particularly important that we work with PSRC. They are working on an update for their 2040 plan, the regional transportation plan, and actually I think it's called the coordinated plan. So they're going to come to the coalition and present in October. Coalition general meeting is always on the second Friday of the month. And so we would love to have any participation from you all to help bring a voice to that meeting and help them understand, you know, what rural is all about. We want to make sure that we have a lot of really good feedback for them, and regarding basically that rural equity is a priority, and we need to have adequate levels of frequency, dependability for rural transit to work. So these are just the first few steps. Sorry, I'm taking part of your slide to getting all of us involved in making transit successful for all of our residents, and including creating in-city plans. We were actually able just to work with the Carnation City Planning Board, who were working on an amendment for the transportation element, and they were shocked at the lack of language they had regarding public transit. So they made an amendment that night and are going to be reviewing it again after a busy end of year, but they're going to take another look at it in January of 2021.
Which is so terrific. I mean, in the past, what's happened is when I've looked at PSRC's plans for the Valley, they have been so inaccurate and so lacking. And when I've asked them about it repeatedly, their answer has been, rural is hard. So our goal is, let's all get together and let's, at least for Snoqualmie Valley, let's make it easy. We so appreciate you taking the time and showing an interest in this. Does anybody have any questions for us?
Melissa and Amy, Mike Remington, first of all, those are some of the best looking slides I've ever seen in a presentation. I love seeing the beauty of the rural areas. And your presentation was really clear and to the point. So thank you for being here. You had mentioned many cities have a lack of language addressing these issues. Do you have suggested language that you've seen, or is there some place we can go to take a look at that?
Well, we're working on that. You know, actually, I suggested Duval's as a starting point. I actually was on the city planning board in Carnation for about 12 years. So we do a lot of cutting and pasting when somebody has some really useful information already laid out, particularly in goals and policies. So I actually directed the planning board to take a look at Duval's transportation element just as a beginning. They actually didn't even have SVT listed as a partner currently, and really don't actually have the language for, you know, alternative forms of mobility and, you know, just shoring up public transportation. It was really lacking. You all are off to a really good start. But I did contact Laura the other day to find out when your comp plan is open for amendments, and I will come up with some suggestions for you. But so I don't have anything off the top of my head, we'll say that. But I would love to keep in contact with you all to see what we can do. And Jennifer has been fantastic at participating in the coalition, so we'll be able to stay in touch that way.
Well, one of the things also that 5-year transit plan that we're working on lays out some really good things in terms of valley-wide priorities that we'd really like to do. Also, there's some things for the city of Duval that are really lacking on this that we'd like to beef up in the transit plan, because when we were putting together the project priorities, we didn't have anybody from Duval. And so what we ended up with was project priorities that looked like they would be awesome if everybody needs to get to Arlington. So clearly, we need to work on that a bit.
So,
Mayor?
So I do want to point out that our staff has been involved with SVTC since the beginning. And in fact, the city of Duval actually helped fund the Duval-Monroe connection. And our staff has, particularly through Ms. Thomas and Mr. Laniszewski, have been participating as much as possible with the coalition. And I think everyone knows how understaffed our city is, and they put as much time as possible into this effort, as do I, in many different forms for years. There's also another key component missing here, including the King County Regional Transit Committee, which is of course where all the Metro plans go through, and I believe SVT has been funded by Metro in the past as well. So we can't, I've really encouraged that we can't discount that past work, and need to make sure that, that SVTC wouldn't be where it is today if there hadn't been involvement from all of the cities. So I'm not sure when the planning effort went through, but we have been heavily involved in these issues for years. So this is not new to the city.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Mayor. I think the historical part's important to us as well. Council members, anyone have questions for Melissa or Amy? I don't see any hands up right now. I have a brief one. I always like to ask, you had mentioned that we could use some additional specific language potentially in our comp plan. Anything else that you'd request? What can we do as a city council to help support? You had also mentioned attending the coalition meetings and some of the other regional meetings that take place as well to be an advocate. Is there anything else, Melissa or Amy, that you have or feel like we could do as a council?
I think it would be really helpful if the coalition could work with I guess it would probably be your planners to make sure that just some basic, can you still see my screen?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Just some basic frequencies are included in city comp plans, and that they get on transportation improvement plans, because it's really a structural procedural thing to try and move forward. You kind of move forward inch by inch on these things, and I think that would be terrific.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the specifics. It allows us to be a little more pinpoint. I also wanted to mention I appreciated when you had talked about, it was less about just metrics, but about equity. We all get the balance. They're trying to get the most bang for the Metro dollars that they have. But I do appreciate there's other services like Medic One that is regional. And some areas, the big cities, metropolitan areas have a lot more calls. But we have Medic service out in the city of North Bend and out here in Woodinville by Cottage Lake, which are really critical when it comes down to trying to have that equity. And hopefully we can get that in our bus service as well. For those that need it, it is a lifeline, as you pointed out. Councilmember Naplin.
One thing that came up recently, and I can't remember if it was at our task force meeting with the SVTC, but about when we're planning for development, to ensure that we've thought about if we might need a bus stop, or kind of how transit will interact with the development that comes in. And so I don't know if that's something that Director Thomas and Laniszewski have, thought about as we're bringing in some of these new developments, especially with 3rd Avenue or not, yes, cutting through and kind of having a lot of density in that area. Has there been consideration or conversations with anyone about, making sure we have a spot that a bus could pull over and pick people up or something like that? So I can't remember where that came up, but I remember thinking that was an important thing to think about.
Yes, it was actually at our task force meeting. Councilmember Naplin participates on a focused task force group with SBTC, as well as in the general council. And our Carnation City Council member, Councilmember Hawkins, has been doing quite a bit of investigation into our streets and our roadway widths in Carnation, and has found them actually not built to, some of them not built to what they need to be built to. So after having spoken with the Director of Transportation at the Riverview School District, I asked her what her experience was and the experience of the bus drivers. And I can only speak for the conversation that we had about Carnation, but she's like, we sort of chalk it up to, oh, I guess it's just a small town, we're going to have to figure it out on our own, versus the larger conversation that needs to have, like the Bulldogs in the middle of Carnation, at the down the middle of Carnation put in by WashDOT, are really make it hard to function. I think SBT, I think, Amy, weren't you just telling me that you actually can't even pull over to the bus stop in Carnation and actually need to go around the block? Like, it would be ideal if the infrastructure was put into place to work well from the beginning and not have to have our school districts or our public transportation that we do have try to make workarounds because the conversation didn't connect.
Thank you. Councilmember McHenry.
Just to pivot off of that, I have one question, but before that, just to pivot off that conversation, also the topography of Duval, how it's a big hill, essentially. I've heard from people before at a council chat last year talking about Metro and how some of the bus stops, and this relates to what we're talking about as well, that people with disabilities or people who really rely on transit to help them, it's hard to get to bus stops sometimes, or to stops in general if they're down at the bottom of the hill and there's nothing kind of halfway up or similarly mapped out. So taking that into account when we plan things. But my question that I wanted to ask, could you remind me, you mentioned that we could help by giving input to PSRC. Did you say a specific date that was coming up, or was that forthcoming? I couldn't remember.
So we will be doing some planning and have a larger conversation about it at our upcoming coalition, which will be on August 14th. It's going to be virtual. I will also post that in the chat for you. It's from 10:30 to 12. And so we're going to be just kind of going over what has PSRC understood about our area in the past, or maybe not understood, and what do we want them to understand. And then in October, I'm not totally sure of the date, but it is the second Friday, PSRC will be doing about a 40-minute presentation on the update of their plan, and they're wanting to do their own research. So we wanted to be really clear, have all our questions lined up to say, here's what we'd like to see.
Thank you.
I do want to remind the coalition that I am a member of the Puget Sound Regional Council Executive Board. So when these issues are brought forth, we bring them to our SCA caucus and discuss and push them forward. But if I don't have advanced knowledge of it, it's difficult for me to push those issues forward in a timely manner so that their action can be a bigger impact. So just a reminder that that I'm on that committee and serve on it every month. And if I don't hear from folks, I can't make the recommendations and push the Valley viewpoint.
Well, Mayor,
Thank you. I'm sorry, Councilmember Remington. Thank you for bringing that up, Amy. It actually makes me realize that I'd really like to understand each of the cities and who is connected with, who's the main PSRC contact for each city, so that we definitely make that link and communication a little easier.
Mayor, it's so nice to have you on their board. Is that something that Melissa or Amy could send a note to you now and then when?
Absolutely. And I always encourage anything that comes forth when it affects our valley, if I don't have the information from the groups it affects, I can't do anything to affect that change. And I am in a position to affect change. And we did get some changes to the draft regional transportation plan a year and a half ago, simply by information being received and me going forth and speaking to my colleagues on the board.
Well, Melissa and Amy, thank you again. I did see in the chat you had provided the website, which is getaroundthevalley.org. And
Mayor Pro Tem, Ms. Thomas had a comment. I believe she had her hand up too.
I'm sorry. I think, I'm sorry, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, I had my
Direct
boom
now.
up. Sorry, thank you. I'm sorry, I apologize for that. Laura Thomas, Community Development Director. So just a couple of items that were talked about. So when we did our last transportation plan and update, we included the information that we had at that time from SVT. I had participated at that time, and so we have a lot of what they historically put in there, but what we have to do now is update that transportation element to include the new items and specifically the plan that they have worked on this year. And so we're going to work with them during our next update, which starts actually in about a month. So Troy Davis, our senior planner, is in contact with them. And then one thing, and this is Councilmember Naplin's comment about transit and transit stops. It's been a really interesting process, and Steve was here as well. When we were working on our projects off of Big Rock Road, we made contact with Metro right away and said, you know, we have a mixed use development. Here's where we're at. You know, we'd like consideration of a transit stop and potentially even a layover. And at that time, they were like, no, no, thank you, not yet. You haven't shown us the numbers. But what happens is then a project isn't built until 15 years later, right? And then you've lost that opportunity. So I think those are some of the things that we need to think about, you know, moving forward. I did participate on the Metro 20-year plan. And quite honestly, when I went to that first meeting and we were looking at new transportation linkages, they didn't even know what Novelty Hill Road was. They thought they could drive a bus up that. So there was a lot of learning that went on during that time. So, you know, we have to work with Metro, but what I can say is, like, with COVID and their cuts at the county and Metro, I think we're going to lose ground. So I agree with Amy and Melissa that we're going to have to fight the long fight. And part of that is with PSRC, it's with Metro, it's with our and our county partners as well, because we're not gaining, we're losing. That's all I wanted to say. I'm a little sensitive to it because we've participated in a lot of transportation planning in this valley in the last 20 years, and it's hard. Metro has been they're a good partner, but we're the first service cuts. Thank you.
Laura, I couldn't have said it better myself. Seriously, you have been such an advocate for transit all along, even going back to the Duval Community Van program and working with alternative services. And I think you're absolutely right. Every single time they bring it down to numbers, we don't have the numbers and we lose. So maybe the thing that, at least if everybody gets the message that we have to get them to stop, if possible, measuring us against other rural areas, because each one of us we're all unique little snowflakes. I mean, we are completely different. And the best thing that we can do as part of the coalition is to be planning as a region so that our voice can be that much bigger, so that it's not just us, it's us and Monroe and Carnation and Snoqualmie and Duval, North Bend, everybody, Fall City. If we're all speaking with one voice, we're harder to say, oh, you don't have the numbers.
Thank you, Amy.
You don't mind if I ask one quick question?
Yes, please.
I understand that you have a transportation benefit district.
We do.
Is there a line item in there for support for public transportation at all? Or is it mostly based on infrastructure?
Steve, is that something you can answer? I don't know that there is a specific line item. I don't believe I've seen one.
No.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Steve Lenishevsky, Public Works. So the Transportation Benefit District's overarching goal is, transportation improvements and infrastructure repair and growth if we want it, but it's mostly for maintenance and repair. When we drafted that language, it's pretty all-inclusive. So we have some discretion, I'm fairly certain, but right now it is an infant in its budgeted and line item development. So it's just basically a number in a budget we have no programming for yet because we hadn't budgeted for it because it went to the vote of the people to determine if we would have it this year. So it's up and running, period. There you go. And stepping back just a skosh too on bus stops and pullouts. The bulk of our infrastructure is built with development community support. So maybe the council noticed in the packet, there's a memo. We're going to start working on Public Works standards update. So if we want to, include requirements for public transportation, pullouts, bus stops, and other things on our specific arterials, we should probably start talking about, where and what, and include those in our requirements because we can't do it without the support and documentation to provide that need and identify the need. We can do things through SEPA mitigated comments, but it's much better if it's codified as, a finding of fact rather than we really, really want. And it's harder to prove what we really, really want. But if we have it, codified, and Laura will attest if it's in our code and in our standards, it's been vetted by the community and it's part of our programming. So I guess
Sounds like
we
it'd
can
make
add that discussion too.
Sounds like it'd make a good song. I'll tell you what I want, what I really, really want. Well, thank you for that. I know that one of the churches, Redemption Church downtown, has a gravel lot that they're looking as part of their remodel project that they're working through the permitting process with the city on. They want to turn that gravel lot into a parking lot and have talked about using it as a park and ride lot for transit. Since they mostly meet on Sundays, it's pretty open during the week. But anyway, so hopefully we can find opportunities here to help build that infrastructure. Well, I think we're at a point where we're ready to move on to our next topic. Melissa Moon and Amy Biggs, thank you again. You're welcome to continue to join us in the meeting here, but we deeply appreciate your educating us and giving us some opportunity to participate at additional levels. Thank you.
All right, thank you for
Anything
the
we can do to
invitation.
help, we'll do our best. Thank you so much.
Have a good night.
You too.
Our next item is our COVID-19 update from Mr. Sean Tozer. Sean, I think we have 20 minutes. Most of us have seen the slides, maybe not the updated, but if you can give us the short version, we'll make sure we have time to get to the mayor's update on administration as well. Thank you.
Excellent.
Actually, Mayor Pro Tem Remington, before Mr. Toza gets started, my presentation will be much longer than 10 minutes.
Okay.
As I started pulling in what's been done this year and what we are working on, it's pretty extensive. So I'm happy to move my presentation to the formal council meeting.
We can do that. Let's see where Sean goes. I don't want to cut you too short, Sean, because this is really critical for us as well. So we'll look at that as an option to move the mayor's update to city council meeting if need be. So thank you, Mayor. Go ahead, Sean.
All right, I can try very fast, but might lose a little bit. So my slides are not as handsome as Amy's or their presentation. Theirs looked very nice. A little bit jealous, but we'll go through a lot of this. I did send you guys out the revised version because of new information that became available right after I sent it. So anyhow, you'll see a lot of this here very shortly. All right, so my name is Sean Tozer. We do Evolve Public Works and other things. Here to do a quick, then a couple other items as well, provided there's time. So first, I liked having these slides in here. So the last time I did an update for you guys here at council was on 7/7. So again, looking back in time at where we were at that moment, and then moving forward. So this is the King County situation on the last update, 7/7. and then comparing it to where we are right now as of today. So a lot of things, and I'll kind of toggle back and forth really quick, but a lot of these things, obviously the numbers are bigger, hospitalizations, deaths. You see that percent of deaths has come down a little bit. The percent positive rate has come down a little bit. And the total tests has, gone up a lot. So it kind of gives you an idea of how we've moved through and progressed through that month. We have this at the statewide level as well. So
Sean, at least from my screen, it looks like we lost your slides and your voice was coming through, but it was a bit garbled.
oh no, can you hear me now?
I can hear you. It still sounds a little electronic, but we lost your slides.
Okay. How about now?
So at least on my screen, I don't see your slides.
Okay. Let me try one more time.
Sean, I think
that?
not yet, but I think that we can actually share your slides because you gave them to us.
Okay.
Would
Do you
you?
have those, Jody or Laura?
Yeah, Jody. Yeah, Jody has them.
So Jody, if you would bring those up for Sean.
Let me find them. I'm in. When did you?
He sent the email.
So I think this afternoon, Sean sent an email with the slides.
Okay, I got a lot of emails this afternoon, so hold on one quick second.
Hey, Jody, I have mine open right now. Do you want me to share my screen?
Sure, because I don't think I actually got the email.
Okay, we're just
She
working
might
on the
not have.
technical part of getting the slides back up. So if everybody will be patient, we'll get those up and running.
Is my audio better now at least or no?
No.
Why can't I find, where is share screen? Oh, there it is. Got it.
You sound like a robot, Sean.
Ah,
Chief?
darn.
Chief Hurt?
I just want to say while you're trying to get this fixed that the COVID-19 test is a lot of fun. If you have nothing to do, go take one.
Okay. The man with experience. Thank you, sir. Councilmember Langle.
Yes, it is a lot of fun. I did mine down at the pharmacy, and what I learned was that they actually, those results actually get processed by a national laboratory. And when you set up your password to get the test, you can go online and see your results. So if you continue to test, as you try to be sure you're tracing, it will let you build a record of your testing and tracing.
So Sean, thank you for that, Councilmember Langle. Sean, we now have the slides back up and we are on slide 4.
Were we on slide 4, or should we go back up to the top?
I'm just checking. I don't see Sean now. He may be trying to log back in to see if we can clear up. Are you with us, Sean?
I think we lost him.
He may have logged off and is working to log back in simply so that he can try to clear up the audio.
So Councilmember Remington, the mayor or I can go through the slides until he gets back on, or we could start with the mayor's presentation and then come back to Sean when he gets back on.
Little options. I hate to break up the mayors is the only thing. Once we get started, I'd like to try to keep that whole. Mayor, your thoughts? I'm happy to have you dive right in if you think that's prudent.
It'd be nice to keep it whole. However, I would feel comfortable with Laura starting off this presentation and having Sean step in as he gets back on. There's not a ton of new information other than stats. So
well, Laura,
Thomas,
if
you're happy, comfortable with that, let's go for it.
The good news is I reviewed the presentation today before the meeting. So, and Sean does a really good job. We have conversations at our emergency management meetings. So if you could just, Councilmember Naplin, if you could just go to the second slide. And so what Sean does is, you know, we basically, what we do is we try to keep the model of the presentation the same. So what we do is we pull data regularly. And so you'll probably recognize these slides as we go through them. So number 2 is just the latest update. And so this talks about the different counties. So you can see the legend. I won't go into it, but the confirmed cases, hospitalizations, and deaths. So we'll go to, yep, there we go, current. Thank you, Jennifer. And so you can see this is our where we're at in confirmed cases. And I believe he pulled the data from 8/4, if I remember correctly, as we get through this. You know, definitely cases were up in June and July, but we've started to see, I'm not saying a softening, but it does look like we're starting to see a bit of a softening in our metropolitan area. So we can go to the next slide. And so this is confirmed cases by county. So again, there's 37,000 cases. Look at all the tests that have been, you know, that have been accomplished to date. We're getting up there, but I think, you know, we should still be, you know, there still should be some concern of the percent positive is still, you know, right around 6%. So even though we're testing more, the percent positive is still fairly high. And so I think that's one of the things that you want to always be looking at every time we provide this in this presentation. Slide 6. And so you can see this is actually starting to look better. So you can see, you know, like I said, you know, July we were really peaking, but we're starting to come down a little bit in positive cases. So that's some good news. Slide 7. So this is current trends for hospitalizations. I mean, the good news is that we were seeing cases going up in that 40 to 59, and then even in that 20 to 39. However, we're now starting to see a climb again of the more elderly, which is the 80 plus. It looks like it might be plateauing, but it had gone down. So I think those, you know, that's something that we should be, you know, that we should continue to monitor. The next slide. So here is our current trends. So, you know, obviously this is our mortality slide. So the next slide. So what about Duval? I mean, I think that's always the most, you know, the most interesting data. So we can pull, obviously we can pull the 98019, which is the Duval area in general. So you can see that, you know, that cases, you know, that we have seen cases over the last couple months, and you know, we need to continue to watch that. But you're out in the community, and under my observation, what I've seen is good mask wearing, and so that's positive. And you know, when you go into a business, you see people wearing masks, and so I think that's a positive trend that we've seen, especially in our Duval area, which is good. So obviously everybody knows that moving forward, the governor has put us in a pause. We're in phase 2. You know, we all thought, at least initially in May, that we might get towards phase 3 and then potentially phase 4 in August. As we started to see the cases go up, that's when the governor started to put a pause. I think it was about 3 weeks ago when we started to see a trend where were we going to go backwards, or were they going to redefine phase 2 in some way? And so the governor has come out, and he even came out as late as yesterday to talk about gyms. So many of you may have seen that email. So they're continuing to make adjustments to phase 2. The governor also made a fairly clear statement last week that they weren't looking at this time into moving into new phases. So that was really the first time we heard that was last week. I think we all knew that, but he said it statewide. Next slide, please. This is the emergency management slide that comes with FEMA training. So I think we've seen this, for the most part, every time. The one challenge I think that we all see now is that it's not a typical disaster, it's a pandemic. So you have a lot of oscillation. So even though where it says like pre-disaster, impact, heroic, honeymoon, disillusionment, reconstruction, we're like going up and down. We're still, we're struggling to get to the reconstruction, so I think I would, Sean is available. Sean, can you hear us? Oh, thank goodness, Sean. Thank
He
you.
said I've been replaced.
So we're we just finished up slide 11 and headed into 12, but since you're back, I did the best I could.
No, you did fantastic. All I was going to do is make some funnies about, whether anybody really believes they're in just disillusionment or in the pit of despair. But I think that's, that's part of the phases of this. And again, kind of that picture, it's not necessarily linear. You can slide back. You can be in any given place. A different person can be in a different place. But I think that we're seeing a lot of these stressors and these stress reactions from people in a lot of different ways. So again, something to be aware of. This is something that we looked at very early on as a potential. The wheel, if you could move us to the next slide. And apologies, I don't know, my hotspot died. So we can go to the next slide as well. You've seen this before. Financial impact. So this is what was updated in that last one I sent out. So Dana did go ahead and load up all that information. So this is kind of the snapshot for current expenditures. So rolled to 92,000, and in the next one we had a couple I think we had a couple laptops, and there was another face mask purchase was in there, so that was one of the larger items, around $2,000 for our face masks we've been providing to employees. And then also in staff costs, you're seeing that roll up and just how that has moved. And there's a column in there, just again, I proportioned it to an estimated amount of total hours that we have available amongst all workers. So you're seeing that we're still a little smaller. It's a relatively small effort, but the hours have gone back up from where they were, even a few weeks ago, as we kind of grappled with our own stuff happening internally and reacting to some other things going on in the region. So next slide, please. So there really wasn't any update available for this one, so that's not a lie. Next slide, please. Financial projections. And then actually in that last slide, we don't need to go back to it, but one thing we are going to want to look at is, I know there's a coaches meeting tonight for the soccer association, and it's really going to be, that impact might carry through to fall. We don't know if there's going to be a soccer season at all. So I know that is very contingent on us getting into phase 3, and with everybody paused for an indeterminate amount of time, I think we definitely have some real big question marks about what the revenue potential for Big Rock is at all in the fall currently. So that'll be revisited. Next slide, please. Projection. So I don't put this in here for any other reason other than it leads into the next slide, which is regarding the grant program. So again, looking at projecting what our costs we think we're going to be, and then weighing that against the Small Business Assistance Program, which I think is going to be very important. It was very well received, at least on social media, and I know that I think the response is going to be good. I have no idea if I doubt we've already received anything, but I think this is certainly going to be a program our businesses are going to be keen on taking advantage of as much as possible, and really getting that assistance that's necessary to keep them running, hopefully. So that is the idea.
We have been reached. I've been contacted by multiple people already that are in the process of applying. So hopefully we'll start seeing those in the next couple of days.
Excellent. And then there's 3 short things. Shortest one first is the Hope Links mobile market. So they did cancel a couple of their events that were coming up due to some staffing shortages. Some people quit or retired or whatnot. So Hope Link is going to send us a pallet of 60 boxes of non-perishable food. I didn't want to really let that go. And so I'm going to work with them on how they are comfortable with us distributing that, whether it be through our CERT folks who would be more than happy to do it, or whether we want to partner with one of the faith-based organizations in our community. So I didn't want those resources to go away from us. And so we're going to go ahead. We've offered to have the pallet delivered to us and host it until we figure out how to get it out. The other item was the storm disaster declaration, 4395. So we had a follow-up meeting on that late last week. So that's still moving along as well. So that's a small amount of money that we think will be reimbursable to us. We may not have done it if we weren't going to be in with COVID, but again, I think it could be some recapture somewhere in the $6,000 to $10,000 range, perhaps. And then the last one, big thing, the false alarm siren. So I didn't get a chance to listen to the City of Carnation's council meeting last night. I know that SPU did a special meeting yesterday to talk just about that, but that was kind of a big deal. I think there's going to be a lot more discussion that needs to be had on that. So that was a pretty large oops. And we definitely saw that I have some opinions about how some of that went and that some of that could improve with how their communication went both up, down, and sideways. And it would appear that they did not follow all of their notification lists that we worked pretty hard to develop in the last go round of the full functional exercise. So that was kind of interesting to see, but again, every moment's an opportunity for improvement. So we'll definitely be looking to voice our opinion when we get a chance, for sure. So,
Sean, I see a question from Councilmember Naplin.
This is really quick, and I'm so glad you brought up the Tolt Dam false alarm that happened. And if I didn't have already a middle schooler that went through Tolt, I don't think I'd fully understand what that was all about. I do understand because, you know, my kids would come home and talk about the drill that they went through. But a lot of people in Duval go to Carnation, they recreate, they shop, and I don't know how many Duval residents are really aware of what should I do, what does it mean? Has that ever been something that we've considered putting information out using our social media just to educate Duval residents who may be in Carnation if something like that could happen?
Yeah, I think we did do some of that messaging back with the full scale exercise, and we did some intros to that, but we definitely could, I mean, we'd be interested in hosting an event with SPU, and it could be a, you know, regionalized thing. We do benefit from having those kids who have exposures, right? And so they help provide that information up to the family. And that's pretty widespread in our community because everybody who has a kid is touched by that generally. So that does help. But yes, we are interested in doing more of that outreach. And I think this is, again, another opportunity for that to happen and host SPU for maybe a meet and greet.
Mayor?
And I just want to kind of add to that is that most people in Monroe and the communities along the way to the Puget Sound don't know. And the reality is if that dam breaks, it's going to impact far more than just Carnation and Duval, and it will impact the city of Everett as well, all the way out to the Puget Sound. So it's probably, you know, Sean, Mr. Tozer and I have had multiple conversations about SPU's planning and their drills. This is a good opportunity to escalate that and have them start looking outside of their service area for those downstream impacts and communicating better with those residents in those areas.
A couple other council members, Councilmember McHenry and then Councilmember Lingle.
Just a random thought going off of the dam. I was trying to look really quickly, so stop me if we do have this already, but on our webpage or somewhere, if we had some sort of be prepared tab that, I mean, we have a multitude of emergencies we can face, like the snowstorms or flooding. And so I was just curious for people looking at Duval to move here or people who've lived here and maybe just didn't know some of those things like the dam and Carnation, if we had an accumulation of information or things that, you know, people should, common sense things, you know, that people should keep their pantry stocked in the wintertime or things like that. So I just wasn't sure if we had a tab on our website or a place to direct people that had an accumulation of those resources.
I think we have an emergency management page. I don't know how well populated it is with some of that. It has like our snow and ice removal plan, some other general disaster preparedness and awareness stuff, but I don't know if it has Tolt Dam on there or not. Honestly, I don't spend much time there, but another good idea, and yeah, something we can work toward at some point.
Thanks.
Councilmember Lingle.
Well, my real comment is secondary to this. First one is, the police department has done an awesome job developing outreach for Neighborhood Night Out. And so they've got community contacts that, even when things change, and that would be another place where we could get out to HOAs and have HOAs forward to their membership. I think they're poised and ready to work with us. But my real question, Sean, I ask you all the time, is what's the status of our billing? I know that there's lots going on, but I just feel like I have to keep asking because cash flow is really important.
I know Dana and I were talking about it not that long ago, and I think she was working on at least the human services version of a reimbursable thing. Put words in your mouth, Dana.
Yep, I'm right here. So we're pulling all of the supporting documentation for all of the IT purchases, which are not reimbursable through FEMA, to get reimbursed through CARES Act up to, I think we're pulling them up to the end of June. And then we're also working on the human services grants that the city has already put out to put those forth for reimbursement as well. We're just trying to get the reports back from the existing grants. And once we have those, we can do our first CARES Act reimbursement request.
Go ahead, Dana would probably have a good number, but I would hazard to guess it must be in the $50,000 range.
I would have to go check. I'll see if I can find that information right now, but it may be a few minutes.
And just to add to that, we have good documentation on our legal bills. Well, we do. It's very detailed, which is a good thing.
Sean, Dana, Mike Remington. I appreciate the slide 16 or 17, I think it was, that showed the finance, the costs incurred and so on. And what I wanted to request, I'm pretty simple that way. I'd like to see kind of basic categories, but under salaries, it would be nice to see what falls into the emergency declaration where there's, I can't remember if it's hazard pay or there's the extra pay for coming in. And it'd be nice to see what's just simply overtime related to, so I think it was slide 14. It shows benefits and salaries, but it's hard to know what those categories are. So for me personally, it would be helpful if we could see where they fall in with the emergency declaration, what's just simple overtime, extra work being done. And then under other sections, it would be nice to see safety equipment versus operational equipment that we have to be able to conduct meetings, such as laptops for home, the large screens TV in our meeting areas. If it's possible to divide that up so a simple old fireman like me could take a look and kind of see where the expenses fall into key categories, if that's possible.
Yeah, I think we have some of that categorization even by the bars, and so we can probably pick out some of that a little differently. And then as we start moving into billing, we will certainly be breaking up a lot of those staff costs, like portions of that, what is FEMA versus CARES and what's ineligible, those type of items. So, but I hear you.
I think we've been in it long enough. This is a good time to start being able to share that. I don't ask because I'm concerned about the categories necessarily. I think it's just good information for us to have to kind of understand where the money's going into. Having asked the question, I think it's also important to just say I really appreciate the hard work. This is a huge challenge for us as a city, both for our workers from a safety standpoint, as well as just figuring out with Zoom meetings and all the other challenges. So I want to highlight the outstanding work that's being done on behalf of our citizens to help manage this crisis. And so the requests on the numbers and things, it just helps me to understand a little bit better and where the money's going. And at some point, I'm sure that we'll be able to tie it to where the reimbursement's coming as well. So thank you. Council, are there other questions? We've got a little bit of time left, but I want to give you some time to get to our next council meeting in 8 minutes. Are there any other questions or feedback for Sean? I don't see any hands up. Mayor, you had offered to move the administrative update to council meeting. I would certainly support that if that works for you. Well, with that, looks like we don't have any other business before us. So council, we'll adjourn this meeting and we'll see you at 7 o'clock at city council meeting. Thank you.